So you've been working for years at a shop in a key role, and the current owner is looking to sell and has mentioned selling it to you. What makes this a great deal, and what makes this a situation that may actually be worth running away from? What's up, guys? Ian Sandusky from Lakewood Machine, back here again for Practical Machinist. And today on Shop Talk, we're gonna be diving into the Practical Machinist forums to tackle a poster who came on with exactly this question. But before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications below to make sure you never miss a video. Let's get into it. Guys, so as mentioned at the top of this video, we're going to be heading back into the Practical Machinist forums to try to answer a question from a poster who came onto the shop management and ownership subforum with a bit of an opportunity slash question on his hands that he wanted some feedback on. To very quickly sum up the scenario, this is a situation that I think a lot of us either have been in over the years, or is one that we're probably gonna face if you're someone who's on the floor, and that is buying a shop, especially buying the shop that you currently work at. So again, to sum this up quickly, they've been working at a small shop for what sounds like a good number of years. I don't remember the exact specific number, but 5 to 10, maybe a little bit more. They've been there for a bit. They've been a machinist for a while. They're not coming in fresh and doing this for a year and wanting to buy a shop. It sounds like they have some very good experience under their belt. The shop, as it was described, sounds like it's owned by a single person. So there's an owner and they own the company. It is not a big corporation with a board of directors and a CEO and an international. It's a very, very small shop, and that's important because basically what we're going to get into here. So small shop, one owner. This is pretty typical for small shops. There's one guy who starts it, he hires on staff over the years and keeps it running, and it's kind of based around that one person. Very, very typical. Sometimes you'll get situations where multiple people own a shop. A lot of times when it comes to small shops, generally one guy. In any case, reading into the post, this actually sounds like a very small shop, and that it is the owner, who's one person, and the guy who came onto the Practical Machinist forums, who's the other person. It sounds like the way this guy described it, that the guy who came on and asked the question, he does all the programming, he runs the majority of the machines. I guess the owner runs some. The guy who came on with the question also does the quoting. It sounds like he runs pretty much everything. It sounds like they have part-time staff now and again that may come in for some occasional work. And then the owner, he runs everything else. So he does the sales, he does the back end, he does all the bookkeeping and all of that. It's a little fuzzy on what the owner actually does at this point. If you go to that thread and read a little bit further, it sounds like although the owner was supposed to be the guy in charge of all the sales in the back end, he's kind of getting to the end of his career. He's kind of not looking to grow the business anymore, so he hasn't really been doing that. From the way it was described, although this company, I guess, used to have more customers, it sounds like they essentially have two main customers at this point. They have one that is fairly stable, but not huge, and they have another that used to be really big, huge customer, that has been in decline for years. They did say there's a couple other little customers in there, but essentially this business is driven on these two customers. An okay steady one, and one that is declining, which is not great. The person who came on, just to give some background on that shop a little further, said that the shop does not have the best machines. They have some old machines. They're not top of the line, pretty standard small shop. I imagine it's something kind of similar to this, although maybe take my new machines out of there. Older machines, he said some of these machines still run on floppy drives. And guys, I get it. I have some machines that I've converted from floppy drives. There's nothing wrong with that, but just to give a little background on it. And the owner does not own the building. So whatever this deal is, the owner's looking to have the person buy in, it does not include the real estate, which is very, very important when you're looking at valuation and stuff on a business like this. To make this even more interesting, and why this really caught my eye, because there's a lot of, threads about starting a shop or wanting to buy a shop. This was interesting because the guy who came on and asked said that not only does he run most of the machines and not do the sales end of things, he said that he really does not want to do any of that. That does not appeal to him. He doesn't really want to do sales. He explicitly says, I am not good at it, and also I do not want to learn it. It's not interesting to me, which is fine, but you just need to understand where this person's coming from. On top of that, he does say that he actually has similar capacity and machines to the shop he works at in his basement or garage at home. I guess he had some kind of side hustle operation at one point, and he still has the machines. So essentially, more or less whatever is at his shop that he works at, he also has at his house. The owner who owns this shop that he works at right now is asking $250,000 for the business with a $50,000 buy-in, despite the fact that the shop only has between $280,000 to $300,000 in sales each year for the last 3 years. So $3,000, too many numbers here. $300,000 in sales, last 3 years max. Guy wants $250,000 with a $50,000 buy-in, and I guess the guy would pay him out over the years for the remaining $200,000. So there's a lot to unpack here, and I apologize for the heavy back-end description of this, but when we're going to talk about the factors involved in this, you really need to understand as much as you can, because there's certain things here that should be jumping out to you at this point if you have some business sense. The responses for the form, from the forum when the person asked, basically, should I take this deal or not? The responses the guys on the forum put on there were really, really good. There was a lot of really intelligent insight there, so I do recommend you guys check out this forum posting, because I just felt there was a lot of good wisdom there, and I'm going to try to sum it up and put my own spin on it a little bit, but I do recommend actually checking it out. The first thing that everybody wanted to look at and talk about when it came to this deal to buy the shop or not was the valuation. As the shop's revenues are in decline, right? We have the one customer that's kind of stable, the other one's declining. The shop apparently barely turns a profit due to the fact that the owner is reinvesting in the company all the time, which the poster came on and said was a little bit questionable. He doesn't really know what this guy's buying. That's the justification for it, but essentially the shop is not losing money, but it's not really turning a profit. The lights are on, that's about it. As others put it, what is this person, if they buy this shop, actually buying for the money? The shop is a job shop, and I run a job shop, I know what that's like. Job shops work on discrete purchase orders. You may have big orders, you may have small orders, but it's a enterprise that runs on discrete purchase orders. If this company only has 2 customers that really drive the business, because it is a purchase order, day-to-day business, there's nothing saying that the 2 customers this shop has can't tomorrow decide to say, hey, do you know what? We found another shop. We're not going to use you anymore. Goodbye. And the shop now has no work at all, right? There's no long-standing contract that anybody could point out here. So there's no real value to that besides the existing business relationships. So essentially, what this person is buying are the machines. And as we mentioned, the machines aren't really worth that much. As I mentioned, I also have machines that run off floppy drives, or at least used to before I converted them to USB. And I realized my 95 and 96 old Haas machines, if I ever decide to sell them, I'm gonna probably get something slightly above scrap value for them if I'm lucky. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with old machines. A lot of great shops have started with old machines. But if you're buying them, you need to understand what those machines are worth. Yes, they make good parts. Yes, they're doing that now. But you're not going to get the money for an old machine if you're selling it that you're going to get for a machine that's 2 years old or 5 years old. So something to keep in mind. As also mentioned, the owner does not own the building. So in this $250,000 purchase price, there's no real estate involved. You're taking over the lease. So you're paying all this money, and you're still going to have to pay all this money for rent every month. And that's something that's never going to go away unless you buy a building. Something to keep in mind. So when you put all these factors together, the average valuation that guys in the forum were putting on this business, if this guy thinks it's worth $250,000, most people were saying this actual opportunity, you know, without seeing the books, without having a discrete list of what these machines are and equipment and tooling and all that, you're probably looking at something like $50,000. So about 1/5 of the price of what this guy is asking. When it comes to a lot of these very small, you know, not one-man shows, but very small job shops, typically people tend to overvalue them if they own them. Usually it's built around one person and their connections. So there's, you know, Joe who owns the shop. Joe gets all this work because the customers know Joe, they worked with Joe for 20 years. If you take Joe out of that equation, that company, you may not be able to drop someone else in that role. It's the connections, it's the personal relationships. You take the key person out, that company may not actually be a company anymore. That company may have been Joe Enterprises, and that's okay, but you need to know what you're buying when you get one of these. The second thing to consider when looking at buying a business like this, and also in this specific situation, is the business end of things. This poster has already said and been very explicit about the fact that they don't enjoy sales, they say themselves they don't have any ability in this regard, and they aren't really looking to learn. What they actually enjoy is physically making the parts, running the machines, programming. They enjoy being a machinist, and there's nothing wrong with that. If they're not capable and enthusiastic about doing the business end of things, sales, back end, bookkeeping, accounting, there's nothing wrong with that, but they're gonna have to bring someone on who is. So either they have to hire somebody to do this, or they need to contract that out. And either way, they're gonna have to go through the headache of dealing with hiring that person, training that person, supervising that person, managing that person. And is that something they really want? The second part of that is now they're gonna have to pay that person either on contract or as an employee until that shop becomes profitable. Is that going to happen? Who can say? But it's a consideration. It's possible. I definitely know of shops out there where the key person is more mechanically inclined. They're, you know, the person who doesn't love the business end of things, but they love machining or they love manufacturing. They hire people to do all that other stuff for them. Does it happen? Yes. Does it happen quickly? No. It's, you know, it's not the most common situation. In my opinion, if someone actually wants to own a business in this regard, you have to enjoy the business end of things, at least somewhat, or you at least have to be willing to learn. If this person does not want to, I don't understand what the appeal is for them. When you put all these factors together, I think we can come to a couple of conclusions here. Firstly, whether this person wants to own a machine shop or not, the valuation on this business just doesn't make sense. So whether they decide they actually want to go own a shop, just based on the valuation alone, this probably is not the time to do it in this situation. It's difficult because, as I mentioned, when people build a business over the years, you know, the guy who's selling it, they tend to overvalue it because they built this business, it's paid their bills for 30 years, you know, it's paid for itself and so on. So they think it's worth more than it is. You know, I hear a lot of times guys say, well, yeah, the shop only turned 10 grand in business in profit this year, but the shop pays for itself. You know, if I wanted to, I could go out and make that 10 times. I can make 100 grand in profit next year, but I don't really want to. You know, I'm tired, I don't want to do this. And that's fine. You know, but the problem is they say, well, anybody else could come in and do that tomorrow. So if you wanted to and you wanted to make money here, you could make 100 grand. Therefore, my valuation is here, when really it should be about here. There's nothing wrong with this, but you need to keep in mind that a lot of these scenarios, when people especially want to buy in, so this guy wants 50 grand up front and then, you know, 200 after. As guys on the forum mentioned, these deals tend to get offered when a business is in decline. The shop owner wants an infusion of cash to come in and try to stabilize things a bit, and then who knows what happens after that. It's not always the case, but enough people on the forum said that I believe it as well. So you have to kind of look at the person's motivation for selling this. Let's put it this way. People don't tend to sell super high profitable businesses like that. Typically, they'll take their time and feel out to see who wants it. People tend to sell businesses that are either losing them money or more trouble than they're worth. Something to keep in mind. The other point I want to put out here, and the other conclusion I want to draw, is that at a certain point in your career, I think a lot of people face the choice to want to take their career to the next level. So I've been a machinist and a supervisor for 10 years. I think it's time, I know this business, I think it's time to go out and buy my own shop. If you're in a scenario like this guy and it just seems like the next logical step, you need to make sure that A, you want to do it, and B, are you buying a business or are you just buying your job? In this scenario, because this guy has his own equipment at home, he could take this work to his house and run his own business without buying this. If he goes and takes this deal, essentially all he's doing is he's buying himself his own job. When really, he could work at this job until the business closes, have a steady paycheck, have insurance, have all that, then turn around and start his own business. He has the equipment. He should have the contacts for these companies. There's nothing wrong with not owning a shop. A lot of people make a lot of money, have great careers, make a ton of great connections and friends over the years, working at a shop or working a job. Business ownership is not for everybody. It has a lot of risk, it has a lot of headaches, has a lot of sleepless nights. There's nothing wrong with deciding that owning a shop is not for you. It's a lot like, in my opinion, marriage. If you only get married because it's the next logical step and what I'm supposed to do rather than something you actually think you need to do, you might not enjoy it as much. I'm not a marriage therapist, but I'm just saying, if you want to own a business, it needs to be something that you have a desire to do, not just the next logical step. In any case, guys, I'd like to know in the comments below what your opinions are on this scenario. What do you think the valuation is for this business? What have you seen out there with people buying shops? Are there red flags instantly that if you were buying a shop, you would want to raise up as high as you could and show other people? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications below to make sure you never miss a video. Thank you very much for watching, guys. You take care.